Welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piskor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
One of my favorite cartoonists in the entire universe. Uncle Gilbert Hernandez is in the house, dude, and we are lucky to have him. Please lay down some of that bibliography and let's get into things.
It feels like Love and Rockets is all that needs to be said, but what a bibliography. Palomar, Sloth, Julio's Day, Blubber, Girl Crazy. I could go on and on. I've said this before, but seriously, one of the most prolific cartoonists that we've had the pleasure of talking with. Welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe, Gilbert Hernandez.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you. When you said favorite cartoonist, I was waiting for Tony Tallarico's name.
This is a legendary piece of the Matt Groening interviews whenever he's in Comics Journal, or when he's talking about the salad days, right, of making his comics and things, and he's like, I went to this record store and I had a signing with the dudes from Love and Rockets, and there was nobody at my table. They were all at the bros table. Is that true? Do you know which day he's talking about?
If I'm thinking, there might have been a couple of times, but the main one was Golden Apple Comics in Hollywood, and it was Matt Groening and us, and it wasn't really that big, a crowd. It was pretty small because it was early days. But we did have, friendly fans, and the people just didn't associate him with Life in Hell, which was in the free press. So they didn't really, we knew how good he was. We knew, what his stuff was, but, so he just kind of scribbled a bunch of stuff for fans and this and that. But then again, about a few years later, he showed us.
Yeah, he did okay for himself.
He did okay.
Gilbert, it's interesting because I feel like the tables flipped, because I would hear stories about you guys doing conventions, before we had indie comics and alternative comics conventions. What was it like being a cartoonist doing Love and Rockets, but going to something like Dallas Comic Con or one of these big mainstream shows, and maybe not being a part of what you grew up loving, being a part of that community? Did you feel that?
We felt it was sort of a slow crawl to get noticed. We just figured that's what it was, because we came from nowhere, so we didn't have expectations. But we went to several Dallas cons, and it was just me, Jaime, and Dan Klaus figuring out what we were going to do, because we just sat there, and Chris Ware came by, and everybody was new and young, and we just sort of just sat around while all the mainstream kids were on the other half of the con, So I don't know. I just felt it was, that's a slow crawl for us. We came from nowhere and nobody's heard of us. And our comic when it first came out, it was sort of a novelty, quirky, because Jaime drew so well. He had dinosaurs and he had all this kind of stuff going on. So that's what drew people to it. But once Jaime started saying, well, I want to do something else, that's when they started to drop off. And it wasn't because of the quality was going bad. It was just they weren't interested in two people talking at the time. This is 1982, 3, They didn't care. They wanted action. They wanted goofy monsters. Like I've always said, it's more interesting to most readers to have an alien asking for spare change than it is a real person. Well, we switched to the real person asking for spare change, but they wanted the alien asking for spare change. Now, we could have done that. We could have kept on that. And I've talked to Jaime about this before. We would have run out of material in 2 issues. We have absolutely nothing to say with that sort of science fiction-y adventure. Yeah, one cop. Jaime outdid himself for Love and Rockets too. He put himself so much science fiction, action, beautiful girls, all kinds of stuff going on. What's he going to do the next issue? You just have so many of those stories. I think the mainstream writers have a lot of those, so they can keep going. Whereas that was it. So let's just do real people.
When Love and Rockets starts up, it's 1982. Before Dan Klaus, really, who were your peers? I think about the letters columns, and you might get. It's interesting because you would get a Steve Lee Aloha showing up in there, or Kurt Busiek would show up. But who were your peers when you would go to those conventions and stuff? Because Klaus tells a story about discovering Love and Rockets, and we had Seth on not too long ago about discovering Love and Rockets. Is it you and the Flaming Carrot?
Yeah, I think Flaming Carrot and ElfQuest and Cerebus. Because they were indie comics, so they were kind of lumped together, and it was sort of. So we're part of that at first, just because people didn't know what to do. That Black and White, it's kind of underground, kind of mainstream, kind of heavy metal, kind of this and that, and it just went and then it just started to fade, and then the younger kids came, like Pete Bagg, was maybe a year younger than me. The younger kids, Klaus, we'd start to see it, Chester Brown, used to see, and they were good, and they were coming through, and they came through, and like, all right, we were part of this new thing, and the artists that came in at that time were just like, already ready. We were ready to go, man. We're ready to have an alternative scene. It was great. So, but before there wasn't really many. Will Eisner and Harvey Kurtzman. That's who we talked to at cons. There was nobody doing comics like us.
You know what?
Seems pretty good.
Can you tell us the story, because like it was only ever anecdotal. Never asked one of the guys that was up on the dais. Okay. It's you. It's Crumb. Maybe your brother. Maybe Klaus. Definitely a Bern Hogarth.
Oh yeah.
And tell us about that conversation, that panel.
I say Bern Hogarth. They were kind of upset about the new comics coming out because his problem, at least that's what he's talked about, was that the new artists were neurotic, quiet, just didn't talk. Yeah, I did this comic, like, I don't know, I didn't think, that was the answers. And he wanted everybody to just stand up for art and stand up for the truth and this and that. He was just that kind of guy, and he would yell at you. And he didn't like Crumb. Crumb was on the other side, he was next to me, and Crumb was just like saying shit, like, oh man, this guy's, oh man. And Crumb likes the attention, right? So that's why he did the pratfall. That's why he fell back to shut Bern Hogarth out, and I could hear Hogarth was fucking Crumb, and and then we didn't have any answers because Bern Hogarth kept saying, well, what is your passion? What are you doing? What do you want? Talk about your passion. Get crazy. And then finally, Paul Mavridis, who is assistant to Gilbert Shelton, who eventually took over, drawing Freak Brothers and stuff. He just stepped in and decided, no, we're just different. We do different things. And then there was the big fight, this and that, and Crumb and everybody. And we were just sitting there going, people paid to see us talk, and Bern Hogarth is just taking over the whole thing. Now, if you talk to Gary Groff, he'll tell you a completely different story. He thought how Bern Hogarth was magnificent and just tore everybody up and just did this great thing. And the audience are going, who is this guy? I mean, a woman in the audience called him Vern. Because she didn't hear Vern. She goes, well, who's this Vern guy? We're like, but I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to jump in because Bern Hogarth was always really cool to me. Personally, he was a very cool guy. We drove him home from Comic-Con once. He lived in LA, and we drove him home. He's a super sweet guy. But once he got on his, his pedestal, he was a crazy person. I mean, as far as, passion, and you kids don't talk, and you're a bunch of nerds, So anyway, that's all it was, really. And Crumb just wanted the attention, and as we all do. But he decided to, he could have hurt himself. I remember looking at him going, dude, he's all skinny and stuff. He could have busted his neck or something. I don't know. But anyway, that's what happened there. I'm just telling you the clean, nice version. I don't think, it went on for a while. Paul Mavridis did a really good job standing up to Bern Hogarth, I thought. I tell him all the time, every time I see him, hey, you did great. He has to remember, oh yeah, okay.
This video is brought to you by the books that we make. Coming out in November, I have Street Angel, Princess of Poverty from Image Comics. This collects all of the Street Angel comics that are not in Street Angel Deadliest Girl Alive, also available from Image Comics. I've also been self-publishing True Crime Funnies you can buy on my website, jimrugg.com. You can also get these from my Patreon, patreon.com/jimrugg, where you can find 1986 and BW zines. As Hulk Grand Design is my contribution to the Grand Design series from Marvel Comics. These are going out of print, so pick this up if your comic shop still has one and you haven't added it to your shelf yet. Ed's latest, Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus, 500 plus pages of all the Hip Hop Family Tree comics, plus 140 bonus pages. X-Men Grand Design collects Ed's 3 X-Men Grand Design volumes in one easy-to-find trade paperback because several of those original volumes are out of print. And Red Room, Antisocial Network, and Trigger Warnings, both available now with a 3rd volume, Crypto Killers, coming in January. And now back to our video.
Yeah, that's all. The other one, our greatest moment in comics, getting into comics, we knew we were there. We went to a local con in LA, and I don't know if we have the comic yet. We have copies of it, I think, maybe. And this might be that con where we actually had comics of our fanzine, and we were looking Oh, right. No. We're going to give the artwork to Gary. I think we had to find Gary. I can't remember. So anyway, get in the elevator. This tall guy with his wife comes in, and we're just saying, we're nerds. We've never been to con before. We never met anybody. And tall guy, but he had a mole haircut wig, Tall guy, and we all looked at each other and goes, that's Bob Clampett, man, one of the greatest animators ever, man. What the fuck, you know? And he just stand there smiling. We're standing at his, we're looking at his mole wig and all this. And then a little guy comes in the elevator, it stops, and he just waddles in, turns around, and then we go, wait a minute, and then you can hear Bob Clampett go, hey, Joe, how you doing? And he turns on, and it's Joe Shuster. He's got glasses this thick, and he just goes, hey, Bob, when do we eat? He just goes, oh, me and the missus are going to go have some lunch right now. Come join us. It was the cutest thing we ever saw, because once the elevator opened, they all walked in. It was super tall, Bob Clampett, his wife, and a little Joe Shuster just waddling next to him, and he was talking to him. We were just like, whoa, I guess cons are like this, huh? And we had to ask, but we didn't know what Gary looked like, so we had to ask Harvey Kurtzman to find him for us. We were that stupid. We were like, Mr. Kurtzman, could you tell us where Gary Groff is? He goes, oh, okay, I'm walking up here. I'll show you. That was our goofy entrance to comics. And I'm like, and then seeing Kirby just standing around and not talking to him because we were so nervous. Those are the early days. But we knew we were in there if these guys were around. That was magic to us. Like, oh, these guys are around. These guys are walking the earth. I had to have my wife have Carl Barks sign comics because I was too shy. I was too nervous. It was weird. And that was the same year. That was a different con, and that different con was the same year. And that Tezuka, so it was like happening then. These guys were alive. I hate to say it, they're all gone, but we just fell into it. So we just felt we're kind of part of it as fans, but we had a comic, that sort of thing. I don't know.
Tezuka is, I think, would that have been like early 80s whenever he was there?
Like 83, 84?
84, I think it was. I think that was the year, I think.
One of the things I was curious about is manga as an influence on you. What did you know of Tezuka's work at that point? Like, was it around?
I didn't see manga till later, like in books, collections of the history of comics, and they'd have throw in a few pages of Japanese comics. But where I got into manga, the style of art, was watching Astro Boy as a kid. Now I'm talking about, you guys weren't even a wink in the eye, no blink. We were little kids, tiny, and Astro Boy was on. And since he was a boy and he looked like a puppet doll, we loved him. And he had superpowers and all this stuff. We liked him, the robot, and I just loved the artwork. So we gravitated toward that. And I guess in the mid-'60s, they took all the violence out of the kid shows. So you couldn't watch those anymore. But they brought back Gigantor on UHF, what was the... Anyway, on UHF, we started watching Gigantor, which we really liked, But it was the style of art. I just loved the black and white and the roundness of robots. And just, they would make a robot and then give him a black collar. And that was it. The rest was, flesh-colored or whatever you want to call it. But it was just amazing. We just liked it, And then we gravitated toward... Because there was these two styles. There was the Tezuka style, and there was the Eighth Man style. I don't know what you call it, where it's like more realistic, more like the girls have giant eyes, and but not so cartoony. A little bit, Speed Racer style. Where it wasn't as round like Fleischer Brothers. It's just sort of half realistic. Then we just watched all those shows. By the time Speed Racer came around, I wasn't crazy about it because I didn't like that style they moved toward. Where the anime look, I like the Tezuka style, so I just liked it. And since we're doing black and white, you just you use it. You're like, oh, okay, just put a black collar on it and do this, make the robots round, and it was just because I liked it. And I didn't see manga normally till the '80s, till we were doing Level Rockets, till I saw a lot of it, and then I was like, oh, okay, it's cool.
Do you ever hang on to any of those weird, like mimeograph fanzines that you sent away for as kids, and where would you even know to send your dollar bill to get that stuff? And can you explain some of that material?
Well, I'll try to make it quick. Mario was looking. They would used to have ads in any comic, and sometimes they would have a small ad and it had a superhero, and it just said the Illustrated Comic Collector's Handbook. You'll see all the superheroes from the 40s, and this classic, and we're like, because we're fascinated with the 40s. We never saw anything except for reprint things or whatever, but we never saw stories we just thought, Great Crandall drew Black Hawk and stuff. This is amazing. Lou Fine, the Black Condor. We're like, yeah, but we couldn't find it. We didn't know what it was. So we'd only see it later in fanzines. But so Mario sees this ad, and I was the only one with $1.50 at the time. And he goes, you got $1.50. This thing's only $1.25. You want to send for this thing? I was thinking about buying, candy and shit. But I was like, all right, so I sent away for it. It took forever to come because it was snail mail. It was worse than it is now. And we got it, and we saw how crude it was. We didn't know about fan art. We're like, and basically the artist traced. I think he traced a lot of the superhero poses, and it's like the stuff you see now, and you scratch your head, like the Rainbow or Zippo, or just weird microface, just weird characters. Like, but for me, it was just mind blowing because that's where I go. I go to Charlton Comics. I go to the nutty stuff. I always have. Obviously, you can see, in Blubber and Psychodrama Illustrated, I go for the nutty, and so I just loved looking at that stuff. And then there was an ad in that one for the first issue. So Mario ordered the third one, so we had them, but they always had ads for Rocket's Blast Comic Collector, RBCC, that stuff. And so Mario just just bought one, ordered one, and we got it, and we saw all the ads and all the reproductions of of old comics, and so that's what started it. And then we just ordered the fanzines that we could afford. So
did you do material in Rocket's Blast? We interviewed Jaime some time ago, and he said his first pages showed up in there. So curious where your first pages or first illustrations might have shown up.
As far as I just a small fanzines, like one called the Fans Zine, and that's where I did the Spider-Man and all the villains. And it was just because the guy was super into Spider-Man and Kiss. He was super into Kiss. We thought that was funny, so we kind of corresponded with the guy and and did some stuff. But I just did do Spadillos. Then I ventured. I sent Spadillos to the Buyer's Guide and to the Comics Journal, and just Spadillos. And I didn't know what to do, so I would do superheroes, like for the Eighth Man, like what I was talking about earlier, just oddball stuff. But we're ahead of our time, and nobody knew what those characters were or didn't care. They're like, well, where's Spidey by Jerry Conway, like you mentioned once. I don't know. It just wasn't. It was just sort of fanzine stuff we sent, and then we get criticized for this. Like I drew a great thing. Well, great for me, a Commando Cody with a ray gun, and he had a helmet and a rocket pack and all that stuff. Old Columbia serials. And the guy just, he was writing a science fiction column in the Buyer's Guide, and he just goes, "We don't do this shit. We're serious. We're science fiction. This is just kid shit from the old days." And I go, "But that's the stuff I want. That's the stuff I like. I like Superman meets Lucy on the Lucille Ball show. I like that stuff. But the science fiction fans are serious. They didn't want anything to do with it. So I got a lot of criticism for drawing robots and stuff that were retro." And since I wasn't making comics regularly yet, I put super detail in everything. So it's a lot of my super detailed art. It's not even in the sketchbooks we put out and stuff. They were just like, "Well, that's a nice robot, I think." Things like that. And I thought, well, and then you find out the guy's 15. Oh, okay. I didn't. I thought these were old grizzled guys who liked old comics. No, these are kids, and that kind of inspired me. I go, well, these kids are doing it. These kids want to know about comics. They want to do stuff, but I would ignore their taste. I would just know that they're into it, and that was good enough for me. So anyway, that's kind of how it started. We just fell into it because we're fans and we just wanted to see what is the weird history of comics, and we weren't disappointed because it got weirder and weirder the earlier you went.
Gilbert, whenever you do the Love and Rockets, the self-published version, was there? Like, were you trading comics through the mail? Like, were you buying fanzines through the mail at that point? Or, was there some kind of community around the idea of, like, I'm going to self-publish? You had mentioned Dave Sim and ElfQuest, but was there something like mail trading, like fanzines going on at that point?
If there was, like, we didn't know about stuff because when we started meeting people, they would talk about stuff like that. Well, if you do this and you do this, we'll do this for you and you'll do this for us. was like, what are you talking about? We're doing Love and Rockets because we don't like what you do. We don't like that wanting, being influenced by the mainstream and making new comics, fan comics or fanzines from the mainstream. And I just wasn't into it. I like the history, I like the whacked out history, of comics. And I don't know, what was the question?
I just wondered if there was like a community of people that were self-publishing whenever you started self-publishing.
There were, but we were all so different. And since Hyman and I came from the punk scene, we were impatient. We didn't want to deal with fanish type, oh, this is a great funny animal, robots, things like that. This is before the Ninja Turtles. Speaking of showing us, the before the Ninja Turtle, there was small little comics like that. That's why Ninja Turtle didn't surprise me when it came out. Of course, it was surprising when it became such a hit, but it was normal. When Kevin Eastman gave his copies of the first issues, he was all excited, like, yeah, we're publishing comics too. And so, yeah, okay, great. And we looked at it and go, that's well drawn and stuff. But then you just put stuff away. You put it aside. So
that's a fascinating thing too, because that's 2 years after you guys. Like that's why we're talking about that period, because it's you guys are so peerless at that time, and there's nobody doing stuff like you. I guess maybe Gary Panter comes to mind. He's always associated with that like West Coast, like Slash magazine kind of aesthetic. Were you aware of his work when you guys were busy?
Yeah, during the punk scene in LA, the main fanzine was called Slash. It was a tabloid size, and they published Jimbo. That was the first Gary Panter comics published. So we'd see it, and we just thought it was really funny, because it was during the punk days where anything was just nuttier the better. But seeing punk in comics was like, how do you do that? How do you? So Hymet was wise by just making it normal people as punks, and doing that. But whereas Gary Panter was, it's abstract and wacky and nutty and crude, and he had his character Jimbo that was just his generic punk character, and he's put him in situations like, he opens a bottle of Coke and he cuts his thumb, and that's the whole story, So yeah, Gary Panter was like him and Raymond Pettibone, because he was doing Black Flag Flyers. So the guys were around, but it was just a slow crawl to change things. It wasn't until the Klaus and those guys showed up. It started showing up in Burns and of course Raw magazine, and all that stuff. All those guys started, Woodring later on, and all these people, all these top-notch, really high-end cartoonists started coming out. We couldn't be ignored anymore, and that's how that happened in the mid '80s. It was like, kaboom, let's go, And the mainstream, oh boy, I heard stories about them. They're flipping out. Like there was one time somebody told me, I was a colorist, I think, at DC, and just said, oh yeah, when the new issue of Love and Rockets used to come in, everybody would stop working, and the brass would get pissed off. Like, why are you reading this comic instead of doing your work? It's like, why this comic? Too fucking bad. You couldn't see it. Oh, I've been told by two. I won't say which publisher, vice president of DC or publisher, what you want to call it, said, "Oh, we loved your comics, but we would never print them." They would tell us shit like that. I'm like, "F you," We'll just do it ourselves, and we did.
You don't want to name names on that one, though, man.
Nah.
No, I'm fucking with you. But what did you think about guys like who were established when you guys came into the game? You do your thing with diligence for years and years. You start to get your little shine, and then you get like your Kyle Bakers kind of doing their unique kind of comics, or even like a Bill Sienkiewicz, like Stray Toasters. Did you have any sense of any of that material, and what did you think about it?
Well, I thought it was their kind of stuff, because I wasn't really following their type of stuff. I don't know. I just wasn't into it so much, because I think I was just so involved with the characterizations in Palomar, and Hein was with his characters, that I didn't really relate to it anymore. I started moving away from it because I was getting so much in my own world. It's the blessings of the narcissist. I just wanted to do that. So I was impressed by them, but I didn't care to read them. I didn't care to like read this further adventures or whatever it was. But I appreciated it, I admired it. But it was that different group. There's that weird group in the middle where it's Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman and those guys. And then there's the other group that's us and Dan Klaus and Peter Bagg and Crum. And then there's the mainstream where it's just, I don't know, whoever's around. But yeah, so there's all these little pockets of like, who were the coolest comics, And every once in a while, you'd hear the other group saying, like, yeah, well, we're the real stuff. They're just, they won't be around.
And you guys were pretty punk rock about sort of like there's some quotes about Watchmen, like, yeah, we read Watchmen, like it's what do you remember, what's the quote? Do you remember the quote?
I don't remember it. It was probably something stupid because I was arrogant. The only problem with Watchmen, and I'll say this now and even then, was that I don't care about reconstruct or deconstructing superheroes. I like superheroes. I'll pick up Fantastic Four number 49, and I'll enjoy that. And then to read something about, well, this is really stupid. These characters don't get along, and they're wearing underwear, and this. Shut up. You know, like I said, I like the 40s stuff. I love the Justice Society's costumes. They're my favorite costumes because they're all mismatched and kind of like colored like your jacket, you know.
Right.
And I just loved it though. I just thought, and people go like, oh, you like that Flash? He's got that stupid helmet and this. And I go, but that's cool. It's Mercury's helmet. It's so naive. It was for children. It just opens up children's imagination, and this is what happens to fan stuff, like science fiction and stuff. They start to close it up. And it has to be like, oh, it's all about what you can't do. In science fiction and even comics, it's about what you can do. Science fiction is about what you can do. That's what you have to come up with a good reason for something to happen. Where they're always like, well, no, you can't have a Black Vulcan. Oh, no, you can't have this. You can't have that. Oh, that's Spidey can't fight this character because this is going on in the universe and stuff. And I just started that just started to bore me, you know, because it was no longer Kirby and Ditko, because I'm stuck on that. Kirby, Ditko, and Stan Lee. I'm stuck there, you know, those three guys, you know. So anyway, I don't know. I'm probably going off on a tangent again. But
it's a conversation.
No, so watching. I didn't think it was bad. I thought it was well done. It just bothered me that, like, well, I'm not that into deconstructing superheroes, and the fact that he lifted the entire plot from an Outer Limits episode, which is my favorite Outer Limits episode. I went, you gotta come up with some ideas, dude. You know, that was all it was. So really, it's a success. It should be good. But I'm just not.
Well, Alan Moore agreed with you, by the way. Like he reiterated what you said. He's like, I agree with them, and I think it's his famous, like the cover feature TCJ where it's the big Alan Moore interview. I think he talks about it in there. He's like the bros are right, you know, because it's the hyperbole of everybody else who was pumping it up.
Do you respond to like the aesthetic part of, we'll say Watchmen since we're talking about it, but I would say contemporary superhero comics in general, you know, like a more detailed, more labored style. Do you respond to that at all?
No, I don't look at mainstream at all, except at a glance, and I will be impressed. I can't believe how well these kids can draw. You know, they go, oh, this guy came from Argentina and he's like 12 and and then they draw fucking great. 2 years later, they're gone. All the great artists, all the ones that you think are, you know, it's just because nothing lasts anymore. It just, you can't. Luckily we started in 1982, so we were able to stick to it. Whereas you come up now to last, and a lot of people don't care to last. They get burned out. They want a different job, you know, whatever. And I go, well, the reason we stuck to the rock is because we believed in it. We believed in what we could put in it, and that's what keeps us there. If we didn't believe in it, I would have given it up a long time ago. You know?
It probably helps that you're creating the whole thing. You know, you can make stories and characters that you're interested in as opposed to, here's the script, draw it.
This is a little side note on that. I was on a panel at Comic-Con, and it was a Peanuts panel with Fantagraphics. And I was sitting next to Charles Shaw's widow, Jeannie. She's a really, really sweet woman. And somebody in the audience just stood up and goes, well, you know, yeah, Peanuts is great, you know, Charles Shaw's, but Charles Shaw's and Disney are probably the greatest creators of. And we just went, Disney, the best of Disney is a bunch of people. You know, it's got the name, but it's a bunch of people. All these people that made those early cartoons and early comics, those are real good fucking people who were doing that stuff. And she just goes, Charles did it himself. They go, that's right. Charles Schultz did it all himself the whole time. Everybody's just like, really? You didn't? Yeah. I don't know. I like to tell that story because she was happy when I said that.
She was ready.
Yeah, she was like, you know.
Every now and then, man, you do that little dalliance with DC Comics or something, man. Shelley Bond will get you on the hook for something, and explain to the audience is pretty hip, but explain to the audience what it's like to do something with an editor at DC on one of their superhero type titles compared to doing your own thing?
Well, with Shelley, it was with Vertigo mostly, except for it was with Vertigo, and so it was more in indie type stuff, even though it's still DC. So I could work with her on that. We disagreed on a lot of stuff, but I could work with her on that.
Yeah.
I did one. I might have done a couple of superhero things. I did Birds of Prey. I wrote it, and I'm just completely embarrassed by it because the truth came home to me. I can't just jump over and write superhero comics. I thought I could. I thought, well, it's easy. No, those guys, those folks that do that stuff, they work hard to get that shit because they have to keep coming up. Monthly comics, bang, 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 bang. They got to keep going. So I learned to appreciate that in their work, and so I worked with Shelley, and it was okay. Birds of Prey was hard because I had to come up with, Birds of Prey was a Black Canary and a Batgirl in a wheelchair. She's Oracle, and that kind of stuff. So I had to deal with that. And I thought, well, does any of them have a boyfriend? They go, well, Dick Grayson dates so and so. Oh, great! I get to use Robin. Yay! Yay! They go, no, you can't use Robin. I get to use Nightwing. No, you can't use Nightwing. And I went, it goes because he's in another universe right now. Oh. I was like, okay. So I got to use Dick Grayson, which was, I'll take it. But yeah, things like that. And and at the end, by the end, I was so tired of it. It was supposed to be, it just became, what are non-powered superheroes doing in superhero comics these days? It's such an epic world they live in now. So that was just my little question. And so that's why I brought in Metamorpho. And they flipped out. Like, why did you bring Metamorpho? I go, he's in your fucking universe, but not in that comic. So Metamorpho was in the last couple of issues. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'll never get a job again.
Well, the beauty is you're a comic maker rather than just like a comic writer. It's like the people that just do that one discipline, I mean, they need that system.
You know what? That's what I learned, and that's actually my main disappointment in my entire career is I wasn't able to switch over and just do a good mainstream comic, at least for a while or something. Because to tell the truth, we needed the work. That's why I did all this advertising and stuff. I can't do that stuff. They don't ask me to do that stuff, so I have to do whole comics, whole series and shit. So that's why I kind of did that kind of stuff. So it was pretty busy.
Yeah, you have a stretch where you work with all kinds of different publishers, Drawn and Quarterly, Dark Horse. Any comparisons in terms of publishers? Like, why go there and why not stay with any of them?
That was actually pretty scary stuff because it's like right when I hook up with Fantagraphics myself in like 2012, then all my favorite Fantagraphics guys, they jump ship and they're running off to Canada. And you got Marvel Season and there's Death Ray and then Chris Ware's publishing his own stuff. I'm like, what is happening here?
It depends. Like it could be that sometimes, because like when you finish a major project, let's say a company like Fantagraphics, now they gotta put it together. It takes a long time for it to get out there, just because you have to put it together, and they're a small company. It was like, well, I got to do another project. I do this for a living. So you go to different companies. That's why you jump from company to company. Really, if it's going to work. I mean, I wouldn't go to Drawn Quarterly or Dark Horse if I thought, oh, I'm doomed, I got to do this. No, I knew I can make it work. Because I worked with Diana Schutz in Dark Horse, which is great, and like the stuff in DC with Shelley. Drawn Quarterly was Tom Devlin, and, it was fine, They have different schedules. They're a little more tight on schedules compared to Fantagraphics. Fantagraphics just gave up because when Kim Thompson was around, he and Gary were always like fighting for deadlines, and nobody could make them. So they just gave up, Whereas Drawn and Quarterly, since I was new there, they were serious about the deadlines. And I get it,
So when you're going to these other companies, you're pitching a project. It's not like, in my head, I'm picturing you're just making your next story, and then, the publisher says yes. But are you actually pitching, like, here's my proposal, and they say, yeah, we'll do that?
Well, sort of. Yeah, it depends. I would only talk about it mostly to like Shelley or say like Diana Schutz or somebody who already got me, who understood me, and they were with Diana. She was looking for a different kind of book for me than I was doing for So she allowed me to do a couple of stupid comics that, that I did just because I had the material ready. I like, oh, that's another thing. You wonder, like, why did he do this comic? Or why did he do Fatima? Or why did he do, because I had the material ready. The Fatima story was actually a Fritz book. Well, I needed it for a different company. So I just changed the characters. Yeah. So anyway, there's that happens a lot. But I don't know.
So that's great. I'm curious about your writing because you're so prolific. Are you constant? Like, do you have a schedule for writing? Like, do you have a process that you sort of typically work from? Or are you just writing down ideas when you have them, and then eventually you go, oh, that's the whole story? How does that work?
Lately, since it's been so many years, and I heard this about other older cartoonists, is they'll just start drawing on the page and start thinking of the story. Like Carl Barks, he didn't even pencil after a while. Barely. He would just, and then because he drew the ducks so much, he just barely did it. And same with me, it's the writing. It's like, okay, right now I'm doing a half Palomar story, half modern, type thing. And I realize I haven't used these characters in a long time. That'll be my reason to do it. Really, that's it. Like, I'll do it because of that. And so I'll throw that in. But I don't have a story, but I have the characters. So that's what happens to me now. I have characters, and they're all standing there looking at each other, but they're not saying anything because I don't know what they're saying. So I don't ink the expressions yet, and then I start to write it. And it starts to come together, and I start changing things here and there. So I basically write it as I'm just basically doodling on the page or just laying out pages. I always give a young a cartoonist the advice of, if you're going to use pencil and a straight edge and an eraser, to rule your borders, and especially the outside border. If you don't know what your panels are going to look like, wait. But rule your borders in pencil. Rule your borders. Get your pages out. Do that. And if you're going to do a static type story, 6-panel grid, 8-panel grid, 9-panel grid, do it. Just do it right away. Don't ink it. Just pencil, because there's nothing worse than having a great idea and running to the drawing board and the paper's blank.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the steam goes away when you're just ruling borders. And shit, that's not the right line. White out, or start over, that kind of stuff. I try to avoid that. So I try to tell young cartoonists who are still using pencil and a straight edge, rule your borders before you get to the page.
We were looking at Julio's Day a couple weeks back, and just such a magnificent comic. And there's so much editing that's required to make a comic like that work. I imagine, like you got these set number of characters, you got 100 years of time. Like, which moments do you choose? How did you approach something like that? Was there a lot of back end work to get that comic to work?
Well, all I can think of is the mistakes, and they're glaring to me. It was basically originally it's going to be a guy's life for 100 years. It was a gimmick. I thought, okay, 100 pages, 100 years, let's do it. It turned out that I couldn't do a year on each page. So if you really look close, it's not.
Right.
There's added pages, there's this and that, and that. And I didn't think far enough to make the characters look different enough. That's the main problem for me.
You think so? Because that's very self-imposed. It was very clear to us in the read.
But I had to. But once I did that, and they looked the way they did, I had to really work on the writing to make it clear. I couldn't do it with the drawing. For me, I had to make it clear who this is. Like Uncle Juan, the bad guy. Well, I just should have given him a beard. That's all. I gave him a beard, and then the mother and the daughter at one point look exactly the same. Well, one of them should have just had a bunch of freckles. Literally things like that I've done over the years. Just at the last moment, you realize, oh, this person looks too much like that. They're not going to know who this is. And so I'll just put some scars on their face, or I'll put a goatee or freckles, or I'll take out the dark eyes and make them blue or something. Things like that, just to make sure they look different. So that is a little disappointing. And the third thing was I didn't really make clear what year it was. I didn't put dates. I didn't do captions. Late early 60s, late 70s, early. I didn't do that. Even though that's annoying, it helps.
Oh, you did not need that.
It didn't matter in the reading.
What you had as the timing device was the wars that the
Right.
Florence Nightingale type chick. She's going off to World War II and going off to Vietnam and going off to Korea and all of that. Like that's your time device, man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
that was my cruelest, that it had to happen, because I made her such a good character. She would just pay her way to go to wars and nurse people. That's what she wanted to do. Her last war was, there's a storm. She drinks a Diet Coke and dies. I heard some stories about that. Like the desert heat was poisoning the sodas. This is what I heard. I don't know the truth. But I thought, well, that's a good way for her, irony for her to, leave our story,
So with something like that, she is a tangential side character.
Mm-hmm.
Do you work that out at the start? Do you know what her arc is going to be? When did you duel this out? Was it over like 10 issues?
It was over 10. It started out like the full, my main story, but I just started getting, this is what always happens to me. I start getting ideas for other things. And this is why I started doing extra comics, because they just don't fit. I won't be able to fit it in here. I have to finish this. So Julio's, if you'll notice, like maybe chapter 5 or something like that is like one page in Love and Rockets, and Love and Rockets is not a monthly comic, so you got to wait, So I was happy. I learned my lesson. I thought, don't do it that way, So, yeah, it was just a gimmick in the 100 Years thing. But I just wanted to have graphic novels. That was the time where, like, you showed your chops if you had a graphic novel. Now I don't believe in graphic novels. I don't. I mean, it's fine. I mean, when you do them all at once, you can't have all your best ideas all at once. They come at the end, or when you're rereading it. You go, oh, well, I'm going to throw these pages out, and redo them or rewrite the dialogue or something. There's just things that happen. So I didn't like doing those early Fritz books because like Troublemakers took 3 years. That should just take me a year, but it took me 3 years. Maria M, I did it twice. Remember, it came out and I just couldn't get to the second part. So it was like, and then I finally did it. They said the second part's not going to work. We have to reprint the first one and add the second to it. And I go, oh, that's fine. So now I have this purposeless Maria M, where and then there's the good one, the second one. So anyway, that I'm just too busy, crazy, and I don't see what's ahead of me till it hits me in the face. That, well, okay, I better change that.
We were just, I think it was Neil Gaiman. We were listening to some of his ideas on writing, and he was talking about, if you don't know what's coming next, then your reader doesn't know either, as opposed to maybe if you plan everything out and have a tight outline, it's a very different creative experience. Do you keep notes as you're working on like these multiple stories at once? Like you mentioned earlier about Palomar and having such a large cast. Mm-hmm. Are you sort of noting them somewhere so that you can keep straight, like who's doing what and when and where are they?
Sometimes if it's a part of the story that I really got to work out and reuse a character or leave a character out, sometimes I have to look closely at it. But most of the time, I look at there's that book that came out, Fantagraphics put out, and it had our character lists on it and see what happened to it. That's where I get that's my reference. I'll go, is this guy still alive? I don't remember. Are they married, or does he have a big nose or a little nose? Or I have to look, and some of them are just they're vague. The information, it doesn't say if he's dead or not, so I'll use them. It's just stuff like that. Because I can't remember all those characters where they were last. I know who the characters are. I go, what have they done? Have they already done this? And I have to look back, and I go, I've already written this story, or things in the story that I'm thinking about doing, and I go, oh, I already did that. So.
I was at the Fanta offices years ago, like when Blubber was just starting up, and they just got like a FedEx from you for like Blubber number 3, and what this FedEx was, it was the original artwork, and I snuck in there with their permission and stuff, and I'm like checking out Gilbert's artwork, and it's all on the page, man. It's all on the page. Might even like paste up a balloon or something like that. Like it's all practical. So you're sending this stuff through FedEx, and there is like a law of averages, and you've been in this game quite a while. Do you have any scary stories about sending the work through the mail?
We only lost something once when we were doing calendars, and somehow it just didn't get to us or them. I can't remember which it was, and they just go, it's gone. Nobody knew where it was, and FedEx was tracking it down and this and that. So we had to redo some of those pages. Luckily, we made good photocopies, so we redid some of them, and then like the next day, then it came in the mail. So I was like, oh, so that But that was the only time. I don't normally do that now, but
You scan stuff now yourself?
yeah, we scan. Well, my daughter scans it for me because I'm old,
Right.
and so Balaber, I send it in the mail because it's like it's
Yeah, she
just,
was quite young.
yeah. And she,
I'm just trying to think, imagine her seeing that stuff.
oh, just don't look at it. She goes, I have to look at it. So oh, that was it. And then even a couple of psychodrama illustrators were a little rough, and I was like, okay. So I will send up only if I chicken out, but normally I don't want to. I don't want to. I got to learn how to scan. That's all.
People are looking for a Birdland reprint, man. You're going to have the girl scanning those pages?
No, they're already done. I don't need to add anything or change anything to besides all the pages are sold.
That is a question that came in though from our audience. They're looking, those Arrows comics. They have their niche and they have their audience, and those comics are expensive. So something like Birdland, is that something you got out of your system, or can we get a new version of that at some point?
Well, there will be a deluxe edition, and I think they're going to add Garden of the Flesh to it, which I'm not sure that'll fit because it's a little color thing. So I don't know, but yeah, I mean, if they want to, people ask me all the time for it. I go, why? It's just gross. I didn't like I was overdoing everything with the art because I did it at the same time as Love and Rockets X. And Lemon Rockets X was like a little more, was so restrictive in 9-pound grid, and I was doing this whole epic thing with this 9-pound grid, and it just burned me out. And I just was, I'd look at comics or read the Comics Journal and just go, I fucking hate comics. And I just did it for that. That's the sad thing. But there was a period with the Comics Journal. Sorry, Gary, that where it was just like so depressing after you read it that I would just run to Alter Ego when it was still good and just read about 40s artists and things like that. And I go, oh, so when I look at the Comics Journal, I hate comics. When I look at Alter Ego, I like comics. Something's up here. Yeah. But that was then. Then things changed. But I remember thinking that at the time. Wow.
I feel like you have more sex in your comics than almost any mainstream comics I can think of. And by mainstream, I mean not pornography. I don't mean like Marvel DC. Was that something that was like you were conscious of early on? Was it just something that came natural? Is like you're doing comics with adult characters, so that's part of the world? I don't mean it in a salacious way, but it's something that I think separates your work from almost everyone else who does comics that are for mature audiences or, adult's such a weird word in this context. But I mean like comics that an adult can read, and it feels like these characters are real characters that you can understand and relate to. Was that something that you were conscious of, like putting into the work, or hesitant to put into the work?
I grew up in the '60s, and so Mario, was looking at underground comics. We discovered underground comics, and it was all sex. So I thought, well, they're doing this. They're not getting arrested. I mean, it's like it's normal, I guess, for a certain group of people reading these. I just thought it was okay. I just thought, good. This is fun. And then I started to see a lot of European reprints, a lot of European collections, and there was all kinds of nudity and sex in them. And I thought, well, why not? And like Heavy Metal magazine was reprinting that stuff, a little bit of sex in there. So I just thought, well, that's the next thing. I'll just have sex in my comics, and I did think about it. Well, it'll make it unique because they're not going to do this in Spider-Man. They're not going to do this in the mainstream. So I'll just do this here. And then even my peers like Klaus and Bag and those guys, they weren't going to do sex comics, a little bit, jokey, but not, and I just started doing it, and I like to be defiant. People getting mad. Why are you doing that? Why don't you do a story about Boy Scouts? I'm like, well, that's sex too. But anyway, yeah, I just did it because I'm just a crazy person, I guess. I just liked not shocking people, but like, yeah, here we go. Yeah, all right.
You know what? I didn't even think about this for the purpose of having the conversation. It wasn't at the front of my mind, but we're there now. And not too long ago, there was like that bullshit with one of your comics getting taken out of like a library or something. People, yeah. Can you tell the people what that is, and how does something like that make you feel? Because it's pretty salacious stuff that they were like throwing your way.
Well, I just saw it as a mistake. Okay, first of all, I think the kid was for seventh or eighth grade, I think. So I'm thinking right away, and then his mom freaked out, and that's how the whole thing started. And I'm thinking like, well, why is my comics in middle school library? I go, why is it there? This is for adults. I've said it from the beginning. My comics are for adults. And people just don't, they see comics. They just don't, you know. And I emphasize it even more now, with the comics I'm doing now. All my comics for adults, even if it's a story about a little kid, it's completely innocent. It's in that realm of my comics. And I can't believe I said realm. I got to say realm. All right. So yeah, and then there was a big freak out, and then she made a big stink about it. But she brought up stuff like what they usually do, and this promoting child abuse and all this stuff. And I just said it's fiction, it's fucked up, yes, but why is your kid getting old of this? That was my response. I don't like I said, I don't take it insults because they're not insults, they're ignorant, so I don't care.
So it doesn't affect you on like it didn't ruin your day or anything like that?
No, I get annoyed, but when I get annoyed, I fight. I draw more comics. I do more. You know what I mean? I've learned to channel those things into like, well, just see the next comic coming. Real Johnny Ryan attitude.
That's good.
Gilbert, do you collect comics today? I was preparing for this and I looked at in the studio and I thought you had a section in there and you don't. And I'm like, wait a minute. What comics are you into, or what movies, or whatever? Are you a collector of anything?
Well, I was up until I finished collecting things. Really, I mean, of my interests. Since Fantagraphics publishes half the stuff I want to see. I call them up and send me those books. That kind of thing. Like those big Popeye collections and things like that. Popeye, I happen to believe, is the funniest laugh out loud comic strip ever. I would read those to my daughter, and when she was little, I couldn't get through it because I was laughing all the time. It's just so good, so wonderful. But no, I just collected most of my comics. Now, if I see a nice collection, I go, is it paperback or hardcover? Now, the reason I consider that now is because my shelves are just like, there's the swayback, horse. So I got to get lighter books. So I don't really collect that much. I got all those Marvel Masterworks. I have all the Fantastic Fours and Spideys that I want from those days, and here and there. I don't have much from the 70s. I just collected up until because in the 80s, there was the boom of reprints and stuff would coming out, and you go to cons and you could still I got the entire run of Herbie comics, which people didn't discover till the Dark Horse reprints, but I knew about the comics and I got them all, and I could get them for $5 now, and those things. And my favorite little Archie comics were like $4 then. I was just diligent, and Jaime and I and Mario were diligent in collecting the comics we wanted in series. I never bought comic books like, say, a whole run of Fantastic Four, say. It would be in collections. It wouldn't be like the comics themselves. Simply for room. I don't have any room for all this stuff. So I don't really collect comics. I look at them when they send them to me. I see what's online. I see stuff. But there's a few reprint books I would like to see, but they're not likely to because collections don't sell.
Name some names. Like what would, because I feel like everything under the sun. We got Jesse Marsh collections out there. So like
I know that was a little. They were pushing that. There's an old comic strip by he was a ghost in Little Abner. Bob Lubers, spelled Lubbers, but it's Lubers, and he did a strip. He and Al Cap, after Little Abner, did a strip called Long Sam, and it's the most beautifully drawn. It looks like Jaime drew it, and it's just this beautiful strip about a hillbilly girl. I mean, it's not about anything like that, but it's just so gorgeous. Lubers is perfect. He drew the most beautiful women, and naturally, they're the Daisy May type, because he came from Little Abner and stuff. But he did a lot of comics, Bob Lubers, and super good. But Long Sam is the collection I'd like to see. There's absolutely no readers for that because they're all dead. I'm serious. I'm 66, so everybody older than me is either too old to care or dead. So I just Long Sam, and there was a Archie type comic strip about these twin girls called the Jackson Twins. And it was basically just a soap opera of these two twin girls and all this stuff. But I love the art and stories because the old comic strips, they drew you in. You know how even though it was every day, and it was the same thing happening, barely moving along like a regular soap opera, it was still really enjoyable to read. And I had a crush on the girls a whole bit. So those two, the Jackson Twins and especially Long Sam, but there's no audience for them. So.
Every time I talk to you, I get a couple new names that I've never heard before in comic titles and stuff. Long Sam, like, was that just in your local paper when you were growing up?
No, I saw it in the reprint books. Like I said, it would just be you'd just open it up and it would just say strips from da da da, and it said Long Sam, and it had this beautiful story of a hillbilly girl with a ponytail and talking to some guy, some thing. But it was good, and I go, so what's Long Sam? What I would have to ask my brother Mario, and he knew as much as I did. He goes, oh, I think it was just some script. That was it. Nobody, so I just was like, wow. And then I would see I go, how come nobody talks about this? How come? Like I said, that's why I didn't really relate to guys early on in getting into comics, because they didn't care about that stuff. They didn't, hey, what about Long Sam? What's that? Is it Spider Woman? They were so involved in mainstream that old stuff just didn't, it was a joke. He made fun of old stuff. And not me, man. I was into it, Try to take my Son of Vulcan comics away, let me tell you. Which are pretty bad.
What about like B movies and old TV and stuff? Is that a big influence? Is that something you still consume?
That's the third part. The first part is real life. Second part is comics. The third part is movies and TV. Yeah. Oh, and you could add rock and roll in it. We just watched TV shows. Loved the Flintstones and Twilight Zone growing up, and Leave It to Beaver, and that became informed. That stuff material would end up in our comics that we drew as kids, because we had our own kid line. We'd have our superheroes, and we'd do a little bit of horror, but then we had our kid comics because we really enjoyed kid comics. We loved Harvey comics, Archie comics, that stuff. Warren Kramer from Harvey, fucking brilliant. And then who took Ernie Colon? He took over from him. And perfect, beautiful art, but it was dismissed by the superhero guys. Like, oh, it's kid comics, it's dumb. I go, yeah, but this guy draws better than that shitty guy that's doing, Micronauts or whatever it is. But anyway, we had our own kid line, and we'd keep it clean like a kid line. There were sort of fake Peanuts, fake Little Archie, fake Dennis the Menace type, combinations, and that's what we did. So yeah, we were very influenced by, say, Leave It to Beaver, and then we'd use plots from it, or things like that.
So what does this mean as kid line? Like a fully produced comics?
No, comics for us is like just a folded paper of typing paper, whatever you call it. But the fun part was just to do the cover, and the lettering. Jaime's kid line was our comic was called All the Young Dudes, because he really loved the Mata Hoople song. But he just called it All the Young Dudes, and I can't remember what mine was called, but I know I just had different ones, and keeping it clean became harder and harder. I want to see somebody decapitated, because when I grew that stuff, it was the late '60s and stuff, and I got in I saw a fanzine, and it had the two different versions of Dick Briefer's Frankenstein, right? And it's got the ugly one where he's mad, and it had the goofy one with the nose up here. And the goofy one, I go, I didn't care about the goofy. I go, what's this Frankenstein? Mario had to tell me. It's old comics from the old days and this and that. And I was like, what the? I just thought it was great. So at school, I would just draw that Frankenstein face all the time. It's like 5th grade, I think. And then pretty soon I drew his body. And pretty soon I drew the lab behind him. Oh, just really kid stuff, really fast, And I remember my teacher, she just goes, Gilbert, you're going to be famous someday. I want a drawing from you. Total Dan Pussy moment. I just drew Frankenstein. Here's this teacher. And she says, oh, it's wonderful. And then I remember she's talking to some girls, and she's holding it. I'm seeing Frankenstein. I think he's holding a head or something like that. And, and the girls are talking to her, and I'm just looking at it going, and I just, even for that second, I had a Dan Pussy moment. Like, what have I done? But then, that I forgot about that, and just kept going. But I did start thinking about myself as, this is all I could think of. I can't think of other things. This is like I was saying about writing for mainstream earlier. I couldn't think of anything. It's just a blank slate. So I was just drawing Dick Briefer. And then when I saw Dick Briefer's Frankenstein, I was delighted because it's cartoony, it's goofy and blobby and sort of plastic man-y and just kind of. So I liked it. But yeah, I remember going like, I told the story before where I'm drawing, and then those right away those Myron Fast books came out, those shitty reprints, the black and white reprints of 50s horror comics, but they have the super gory covers.
That's those eerie publications.
Right.
Yeah, those eerie publications. And Mari brought one home, and I go, this is disgusting, because the covers were just gross and detailed, and a vampire. It was just like, wow. And then I opened it up, and I didn't know that they were 50s comics that they just added blood to a lot of the stories. Like literally just blood spots. And I thought, these are the sickest. Naturally, I gravitated toward them. So I started drawing comics like that for myself. Just gory, bloody, dismembered limbs and this and that. My dad, only time we talked about art, he came up to me, goes, why do you draw like that? Why do you want to draw? I go, it's cool, Dad, it's monsters. And he goes, why don't you draw something like a forest or a lake? Which, at the time, I'm laughing, you're still, no, now I'm thinking like, yeah, why didn't I? It's good to draw a tree in a lake. It's good to do that, kids. So I was just like, I'm into this. And he goes, oh, well, this is silly, but, draw something. If you want to be taken, like saying, if you want to be taken seriously, draw something for real. Use your skills to draw something. Kind of like he nailed it. He was kind of saying, this is a crutch, making guts and gross stuff. If you draw something nice, you got to work on making it nice or realistic or whatever it's supposed to be. And I remember thinking that, and I go, well, fuck reality then. And fuck being nice. And that's where my bad attitude came from. I go, no, I just want to draw crazy ass shit, So
this is Cartoonist Kayfabe. It's a pro wrestling parlance. We're Pittsburgh guys. This is the Tootsmont territory. Northeast. Vince McMahon scooped us up in the 70s. You did the Adrian Adonis comic in one of the early Love and Rockets. Jaime did Whoa Nelly and several wrestling inspired pieces throughout. Which one of you guys is the bigger wrestling fan? And if you have good memories about it, I'm curious about Mike LaBelle territory and what that might have been like during your heyday going to a studio wrestling or whatever.
Well, it turned out I don't remember what started us watching it. I think it was just like we were turning channels or something, and looking for a show. And I think there was something going on like wrestling, which we would normally ignore. We're just little kids. We couldn't relate to it. We didn't get, because it was 2 out of 3 falls. So the matches were long. Kind of boring.
Yeah, like they're sitting there in a hold for 10 minutes and stuff.
Yeah, you get the sleeper hold and they do the arm and stuff. I have to tell I told my daughter now. I go, that's a rest hold. They're just resting. Or else when they're on the ground, they're leaning on the turnbuckle and they're going, no, that they're resting. She goes, oh, that's interesting. I go, but they worked it out because it works out. Everything works out. I go, these guys are really good and they're great in the locker room. I was like, whoa. So basically, we just saw some guy, and one guy was just acting goofy, and we thought that was funny. And we talked to neighborhood kids, hey, did you see wrestling? We go, yeah, we watch it all the time. And so we started watching it. And Jaime, I didn't know this about Jaime. Jaime's very quiet. He just basically, it blew his mind. Wrestling blew his mind. I liked it, but it blew his mind. And then when the women came out, like Moolah, and they'd have a novelty act, and with Moolah and somebody, he was like, boom, he was there, man. We were just more like, this is funny. Because they have to do the act of pulling hair and all that stuff. And Moolah's big thing is like, she'd be all sweaty and all this shit. And the girls on the turnbuckle and shit, and Moolah's going around. We got the humor. And then the humor of the locker room interviews were like, this is funny shit. And you can only find this kind of humor in wrestling. Like each little weird pocket of cult stuff, it has its own humor, and wrestling had great humor. If the wrestlers like Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes are the funniest guys. Piper, they just let him loose. We would just sit there listening to Dusty Rhodes just fucking cracking up, man. I mean, the guy was a goof, he was like this big butterball, and he was like the American Dream and shit. But he was funny as hell and quick. The bull of the wood, kind of his finger into all this shit, and then Piper's yelling, and Flair, he's getting his ass kicked, so he does the strut, trying to leave the leave the ring, and he's sweating and all beat up. Just funny stuff. But Jaime, he's You know, he just thought it was the greatest entertainment. You know.
Did you remember Piper getting like, real heat in LA? Like wasn't his gimmick as a racist pretty much in LA?
He might. I don't know what days this would be, if you know, because we saw Piper.
It must have been late 70s.
By racist, you mean like against Mexican people?
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's the act, because he did that. Because I remember he would wrestle in Oxnard, where we're from. They would have wrestling matches there, and because they knew there was the Mexican audience, that's who supported wrestling during those, right before WWE FE got back with the Wendy Richter Muda thing. It was pretty dead, and so it was desperate. Like a lot of wrestlers were just wrestling anywhere and stuff. So they'd go to Oxnard, and there was a big crowd because it's all Mexicans there, farm workers and stuff. That's who liked it. Grandmas, you've seen it in the movies where it's the old lady. That's true, man. It's so. Anyway, so Piper, I remember Piper was there, and Hyman saying, "Well, that's right, Piper, he's the star." And he was just kind of like just kind of stiff. And I remember everybody's, Piper, you was, and he turned around and said, "Remember, this is just like a little gym. Not even a gym, it's a small room." And Piper just turned around, looked at the audience, and says, "What are you going to fucking do about it?" And it was like, ooh, it was like, all right, to my head, I go, this is the shit. It was one of the greatest wrestling matches, because it was at a community center. That's what it was. And it was a little room, and then you had to get across this grassy knoll to get into the building, and I guess that's where their dressing room were. So Piper and this guy were TNT Tom Jones. They're wrestling stuff, and they ran out. And what's supposed to happen is you run out of the ring, and that's the end of the gig. They go through the door, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's great." Everybody decided to follow them, so they had to keep the act up. And here they are on this quad. This families hang out and stuff, and they're just beating the shit out of it. And they had to, and since people were close, they had to connect because you had to hear it. So it was wow, 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 wow. And it was like, well, we're just standing there like, oh man, where's this going? And Piper actually got a trash can full of trash and smashed it on the guy. And I was like, and he ran into the building, and the door was luckily open for him. So he yelled it, and this guy started running, and Piper locked it. And he was on the other side, go, nah, and he just ran. And so the guy, TNT John Jones, had to be interviewed out there. He goes, "Do you want a rematch?" and all this stuff. It was on the outside. And like I said, this is before WWF, so we were just like, this is fucking amazing, But I could see that it was out of desperation in a way. It was a little bit like, wow. But what got me is how professional they were. They did it. They pulled it off. And because I remember the week before, Andre the Giant and somebody else wrestled. My brother happened to be with friends, and they were just walking through the community center, and the wrestling was going on. They go, "Oh yeah, look at wrestling's going on." And they saw Andre and his opponent running out of the building, and then just kind of slowing down, and then stopping, going, and just going there. Okay, and they just kind of walked. So that was supposed to happen, but the Piper one went crazy because it's Piper.
Would you ever hook up with like Glenn Bray is a big wrestling guy? Did you know him back in the day? Like were you guys at similar shows? Like is that different territories?
That's a different time. He's older, and him and his friend they went to wrestling in the '60s. Their thing was the '60s, going to the Olympic in LA. We didn't go till mid '70s. And that was just in Oxford. But they would go to the Olympic show, and there's even a home movie with him and his friend, and Freddie Blassie's got one of them in the headlock. It's just a whole movie, because these guys were super into wrestling, and they would Glenn, they would go all the way to LA. They're living in LA, I think, and and you see the whole movies, and they got the short butch haircuts because it's the early '60s, and it's because later on his friend had really long hair, but anyway. It was they would have pictures, shots of classic and stuff.
He told
if you ever interview Glenn Bray, he could tell you all that stuff.
Yeah. He said this one time. He convinced his mom to let Gorgeous George come over for dinner, and she made them steaks and stuff, and then when Gorgeous George is done, he's like, "I like to take a nap after I eat my dinner," and then he took a cat nap on their couch.
George, he was a great influencer. He influenced Muhammad Ali's act. He influenced, all the shit talking guys, the wise guys. He influenced that. Muhammad Ali loved Gorgeous George, and that's where he got his shtick from, his wise guy shtick. Because it was funny. It's just.
Yeah, I read the Gorgeous George. I guess I don't know if it was it must have been a biography. I don't think it was a memoir. And Bob Dylan and James Brown also took some stuff from his act because he was that first like television generation. So you picture the white hair on the screen on a little tiny black and white screen, and it's like, oh yeah, that's the blueprint for popping off that screen.
And it's cognitive dissonance because it's would be considered gay to be at that time to be making your hair all blonde and prancing around with a guy with like a little spray thing of perfume, but then you're also a tough guy and you're kicking some ass.
Yeah, that was all the wrestling elements were there.
Yeah, Gilbert, what do you have on your drawing table right now, man? Like what are you working on and what's on the horizon?
I usually work on 3 comics at once, usually, but not like intensely. Just sort of getting it together. Like I get bored quick, so I'll do pencil a page of Love and Rockets, and it's only half written, and I'm like, put it aside. And so instead of sitting there twiddling my thumb, I'll just put out a page for something else. And then, like I said, it's either inking or borders or. So right now it's the next Love and Rockets, 15 I think it is, and I'm trying to figure out, what a lot of the dialogue is, even though I know what it's about. Sometimes the dialogue, I know what the story's about, I know what the character's doing, but I'm not sure what information the reader knows to go forward. See, we're always trying to make Love and Rockets go forward, even though sometimes an issue just seems like it's just sitting there, whether good or bad, I just didn't, anyway. So it's Love and Rockets, and the next, I'm going to try to get next 2 psychodrama illustrateds out before that issue, because this one was supposed to come out before, but I just got behind. I just keep piling up the work on a load, and I just keep getting behind, and I want to catch up. I just try to keep Love and Rockets on the top of the schedule because Jaime's working on it, so we got to get it out.
And I know that come to the turn of the new year, there's going to be the collections of the sketchbooks, which is going to be a very, very exciting thing. Any other big collections coming out in 2024?
Not that I know of, because I had a couple of collections already this year, and so I don't think this that I know of. I'll probably, what I usually do is I have my collections all separate in FedEx boxes, and I just pull them out and I see which is the best one to do next. Pretty much that's why the Fritz books come out so more often, is because I've already done them, and then I just had to add some pages and get them out. But it depends.
And there was recently the beautiful kind of PBS documentary about you guys. And did you find did that serve you in any way? Like, do you notice some uptick in comic sales? Like, what was that experience like?
Well, we're glad they did it, and I thought they did a real good job, even though I watched it a couple of times and I just nitpick it. I just go, oh no. Oh, why did I say that? Oh, why did they show this? Why did they do that? But I don't know. I don't think so. I think we're really past all that. The interest is somewhere else. The interest in what comics are, Love and Rockets doesn't have a pulse anymore the way it did. I don't think. I mean, when something like a documentary happens, before, if a documentary happened, like say 20 years ago, maybe 25 or something, there would have been some notice. We would have started getting phone calls. We would have started getting the Hollywood calls again. We would have started, but nothing. Poof. It's just been so long,
The culture's weird. Yeah, it's not a monoculture anymore. Like when there was 30 channels and there's like a documentary, you could bet that there's a whole bunch of people. But like we saw it, we loved it, and I think there's some kind of Fantagraphics thing in the works. And you know what because they were trying to get, I'm sure you got the emails of like, got to sign off and make it okay. And then I put this note like, let's get some like cartoonists talking on it, because the Love and Rockets thing had like academics and things, and it's like, where was Dan Clowes on that motherfucker, man. You know?
They just wanted to elevate it, for themselves. PBS, they wanted it to be like, they didn't just want to sell it to comics. They wanted to sell it to, like, this is happening. This is Latinos. There's always that going on, especially in the South here. Is we got to just we got to find our place, and we got to support it and get it out there. So something like Love and Rockets is unusual because it's Latino guys, and then we were into punk, and that's what fueled us to do comics and this and that. And since LA had its own scene, they like to exploit that. So it worked out. And it's always like the guys that do these, you find out, like the guys that made this, they're super into punk rock. So that's why they wanted us to talk about punk. And we've done other interviews. We just did one in LA where and there's a big crowd of people, and all they wanted to know was about punk, because it's legendary. I go, it's legendary, I guess, because it's old. But when we were there, it was like, who's playing tonight? Oh, whatever. Oh, we got to drive that far. Oh, there's nobody here. That there was a lot of that. Even though they're great bands, like we saw X right before they put out their first album, and they were so fucking good. And I would just see them every time they played, but LA is 60 miles away from where I lived. So, I would skip gigs. And guys, what did you skip the gig? Why? I go, well, I saw them 20 times, And now I'm like, why did I skip those gigs? Yeah.
Good to go, Jimmy?
Yeah. You know what? One more thing before we wrap up. I talked to you a couple years ago, Gilbert, and you were talking about like your work schedule, and it was a very like a blue collar schedule, like a 9-to-5 kind of work schedule. Do you still work that way?
Roughly, I get up, breakfast, and also I get all cleaned up and all that stuff. And just, sober up, basically. And then start around 9-ish, 8:30, 9-ish, drawing and working. And I work all day till 5. Sometimes things happen. You got to go somewhere. You got to do something. But normally it's just I'm here all day till 5. And then once it's 5 o'clock, I just stop. That's it. No more comics. No more drawing. No more nothing. Unless, of course, what often happens is you're doing something else and you think of something like, oh, so you got to. But what I do is I'll run back to the drawing board and I'll just make a note of it, because I'll remember it. As long as I have a note, I'll remember what I wanted to do. So anyway, that's pretty much it. I work from 9 to 5, with breaks, lunch breaks and stuff.
Super cool. So Gilbert, Love and Rockets always on the horizon. Do you participate in any kind of social media? Anything that we could point the audience to serve you and benefit you somehow?
I have no idea how to connect with people on social media.
So what we say is, Love and Rockets is out there. We celebrate Love and Rockets often on the channel, and don't worry about what number of the issue it is. You just grab an issue and put it together, man. You guys like your Chris Claremont X-Men's. You didn't understand what the fuck was going on in that issue of X-Men that you scooped up. You get the next issue, you get the one prior. You build awareness, man. So scoop up Love and Rockets. Gilbert and Jaime, two of the best doing it. And you got to support that work. So thank you so much for giving us some of your time, Uncle Gilbert. Every time I see you guys, like at San Diego or something, I say the same thing, man. And because like usually the bros are doing a signing like right before it's like my time to do a signing. And of course their signing goes over, right? Like it's like they want me to be there at like, say, 1 p.m. But like they're signing because they got a line. And you guys will be like, oh, so sorry. And it's like, no, you guys built the house. I walk in the door and I get to enjoy my life and the opportunities I have because you guys were there in fucking 1982 when your peers are ElfQuest and Cerebus and like some wackadoo Europeans doing shit in heavy metal and maybe a couple dudes doing some stuff in National Lampoon. But you guys are building the frame that we get to walk through, and I friggin' love you guys. Thank you so much for coming through.
I say it all the time. We give Kirby all the credit for inventing all this comics language, and I feel like you and your brother have contributed as much at this point. Like there are generations upon generations now that are coming out with what we call alternative comics, but really it's a whole new language that you brought to comics that has become kind of the norm. And who knows, at this point, probably more comics readers are familiar with that language that you guys have really popularized than the superhero stuff. So thank you so much.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys, because it's hard for us to see. I'm glad you guys could see this stuff. You investigate, you check it out, you weigh it with other stuff, and that's great. That's why I really like this show you guys do, is because you guys are so into even when you go crazy about going into the detail of how a guy inked an ankle or something like that. I think that's good, because a lot of that was lost with the Comics Journal. It was all about the writing and the largeness of scope and intelligence and adulthood. At least that's what they were trying to do. And what was lost was just the detail of enjoying the artwork and how stuff was put together, and how a certain artist will be obsessive with certain details. And you guys look at that and ask questions. And that's what I really like. That's cool.
Let me bring it back full circle, too, because early on you said you went to a convention, you saw Carl Barks, and you were like too shy to go up to him. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like a real conscious effort. You guys... I didn't see you guys at conventions for a long time, and then you show up at like SPX, and that was the first time I like laid eyes on you guys, and everybody was too scared to talk to you guys, and then like I just went up and was like, "Thank you so much." I basically said this spiel that I did, so it's that full circle thing where like you're afraid to talk to Carl Barks, and then you guys show up at SPX, and everybody, 100% of people are like afraid to even go up to you. And listen, man, look, you guys, audience, cool dude. Like, you can talk to him about any number of things. Don't be shy.
Yeah, because a little different now, because because of, I guess, the indie scene and the punk scene and stuff, a lot of people are closer together than they were before. Whereas, like, you talk to Will Eisner and Kurtzman, sometimes you just didn't have anything to talk about, because, they were older guys, and they would talk about the history of comic or their experiences and this and that. But that's as far as it went. We never got to, like, hang with them, talking to them, I tried, but it just didn't relate, and I think it's different now, because like you said, these people at SPX and stuff, they can just come to us and talk to us. We're not going to be these old guys who don't know how to talk to young people. We don't know what comics they like or do, but we can talk to us, I don't know.
Thanks so much, Gilbert.
Kayfabers,
thank you.
like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell so that we can notify you when new videos are available. The vids are brought to you by the books that we make. And before you is a very robust section of the books that we have available. To begin, there's the Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus, collecting all of my Hip Hop Family Tree works. It's the 10-year anniversary of Hip Hop Family Tree, 50th anniversary of hip hop as a culture. The books are going quick, the books are going fast, and they're flying off the store shelves. So get it quickly if you want it in any sort of timely fashion. Now, the only holiday effort, got the trade paperback for the X-Men Grand Design trilogy from Marvel Comics is going to be available in stores on November 14th. Got the copies of that right now. 2 trade paperbacks of Red Room are out there, Antisocial Network and Trigger Warnings, with a third coming to you called Crypto Killers in 2024 January. Jimmy, what do you have?
Street Angel, Princess of Poverty is my next release. It'll be out at the end of November from Image Comics. You should be able to get that wherever books are bought and sold. It is a companion piece to Street Angel, Deadliest Girl Alive, also from Image Comics. These 2 books, besides looking good on your shelf like a set next to each other, collect all of the Street Angel comics that I have made so far. So pick up both of those if you haven't already. I have been self-publishing True Crime Funnies. That's a collection of nonfiction stories. The 1986 zine celebrating the greatest year in comics history, and the BW zine celebrating the black and white explosion and self-publishing boom of the 80s and early 90s. These are all available on patreon.com/JimRugg if you want to read them now. Otherwise, follow me and I'll let you know whenever they're available to buy from my website, jimrugg.com. And Hulk Grand Design, my contribution to the Grand Design series. I believe these are out of print, so pick it up if you haven't already whenever you see it in a comic shop. These are disappearing fast and hard to tell when they'll be back.
The books are the most important part of keeping the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel going. We are a daily YouTube channel with more than 1,500 videos available to you right now. Give the channel a search. Go on the front page, hit the magnifying glass, search for your favorite comics. Check out those episodes. If we did not talk about your favorite comics, let us know what they are in the comments, and we will push those comics a little bit higher on our to-read piles. The Patreon helps subsidize the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel. 3 different levels of participation there, but the King Kayfabers, the top dogs, they get all the videos that we shoot before anybody else gets to see them. They're hanging out with us in the live stream chat room right now as we are recording, and we always shoot a couple extra videos, at least one extra video, so there's a big queue of videos that develop that only the Kings have access to before we release those, later on down the line when Jimmy and I have to take a break or something like this. Once again, the books are the most important part, but there are a few other ways to support the channel. Jimmy, let the people know.
You can subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe newsletter at the links below this video to keep up on what we have coming out and when. You can also pick up Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts, merchandise, hats, cups, mugs, stickers, and lots more of the Cartoonist Kayfabe
Enterprise.
at our spread shop. That link is also under this video.
So there it is. We laid it out. You have numerous ways that you can support the channel and keep these videos coming to you on a regular basis. Jimmy, without further ado, let's get out of here. But first, please give everybody their marching orders.
Read more comics. Make more comics.